Hello. Welcome to Artist and Critic. I'm Don Gray. Today we're talking with a sculptor, Bill Crozier, and more or less as a first on Artist and Critic, we're actually having sculpture in the studio here. We'll find out how we handle it as the program continues. But Bill, glad to have you with us.
Oh, thank you.
And I wonder, before we look at your sculpture, if you could more or less fill us in on how your career has reached this point, how old you are, where you studied, and how you...
Well, I'm 34. I came to New York in 1967. And when I came to New York, I started with the model. That was the first thing I did. And ever since then, I've been working right with models and very directly with models. I studied at Ohio State, so it was a mixture of, abstract things and just, everything. It wasn't until I really came to New York that I just got very specific with the life modeling. It was something I wanted to do, and, this was when it started with 67.
How did you why do you have an interest in the model? I mean, the whole trend of the art world has been away from that. Why is your interest in that direction, would you say? Do you have any idea?
Well, to me, it was like the most difficult and exciting thing for me to have the model there and to approach the clay. And I wasn't really so trained in it, and I was trained more in welding and wood carving and just more abstract things. And this was just the intense thing for me, and it kept on that same excitement. It still does. That's what really excites me every day, when I approach the model.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I happen to agree with you. I think it's the experience of real life from which you make art and from which the most significant art comes. But I'm wondering, have you encountered any difficulties in your quest, so to speak? Because the whole force of the art world has been more toward the abstract than toward the figurative. I mean, how have you survived? Let's put it bluntly, financially.
I found that very attractive myself. It gave me something to be like rebellious towards or opposite towards, or it gave me something to resist, and I like that a lot. New York has been very good because it was so strongly in certain areas, like I felt there's a whole area to really carve out, not to be in relationship to this person and that person so much. I could really I felt free. And, no one bothered me a whole lot. I mean,
yeah, I'm sure they didn't, since you were rebelling. They just...
yeah. So it's a good way to work without a lot of hindrances.
Some people would find it a depressing way to work, more or less outside of the mainstream of art, so to speak, kind of a loner, somewhat alienated. You didn't feel that way at all. Did you have low moments in terms of the development of your career? I'm just speaking personally because of...
I'm sure of that, but at the same time, I felt that was what's necessary to do, like, really personal research. In a way, I consider a research with a model. Like, it was helpful, I think. I don't want it to stay that way forever. I mean, but for those developing years, I think it was helpful. I don't know.
Not to be subjected to a lot of pressures and influences and so forth.
Yeah, I just felt I could do what I wanted, and I don't think I was totally obscure either, totally. I mean, people did respond to it, I mean, people that I liked. There were people who did have a very good response, so I didn't feel totally isolated, I never had that total feeling, There was enough.
Were you showing in galleries, or did you have an outlet for your work in this period from '64 to the present?
Well, yeah, I had a group. I was in a group show with at the Noah Goldowski Richard Bellamy Gallery in 1970, and then in '71 as well. It was a group show. It was But those were the only, two times I'd exhibited.
Can you make a living from your work? Are you making a living from your work now, or do you have to do something else to help yourself over tight spots? How do you work that out?
I have some sales, but it's not like a total living, no. So I have a van, I do deliveries, I move painting and sculpture, things like that, yeah.
Right.
So it's a combination of selling and sort of odd jobs and part-time jobs.
Right. Maybe we can start taking a look at a little bit of Bill's sculpture here. Perhaps starting with we're setting up here on Bill has two reclining figures here in the studio, and he has a portrait head of Robert Scull. Now, Bill, we're seeing a close-up of this particular figure pulling back from the head, getting the torso and so forth. Could you tell us a little bit about the experience you had modeling this figure?
This is called Bella, after the model named Bella. It's 2/3 life size, modeled like very directly, in proportion. And it was started in a plastiline, and then it was a mold was made and it was cast into wax, and then I modeled it farther in wax. And when it was finally completed in wax, then another mold was made, and from that mold, then it was cast in bronze. But this particular piece was nearly finished, and the model had to return. She's German, and she had to go back to Germany immediately. So I had to take the sculpture to Germany, to Munich, and complete the modeling there. It was a real adventure, but it happened. And so the modeling was finished in Munich, and I found a foundry in Munich and had it cast there.
Had you been to Germany before, or it was a total adventure? I mean, you just sort of plunged, following Bella off to Germany.
Yeah, I was following Bella just to do this modeling, and that's all. And it was, but it transported well, and the modeling went well there.
What were you trying to do with the figure? I mean, were you trying to make it as anatomically perfect and lifelike as you could? Were you trying to capture some of the emotional quality or the personal quality of Bella? What were you trying to do with this piece?
Well, see, in the modeling, it started with one piece of clay is put down, one like pellet of clay, and then a second and third and fourth. And the pieces grows over a long period of time. It just grows. And it's not trying to be anatomical. It's trying to just see, like first it's the direction of the energy, how it goes through the torso, through the legs. That's sort of put down. They grow out like a leaf, from a stem.
Right.
The thing develops, and then it's just always looking at the model and putting down a piece of clay or with the wax, according to what I see, like on the outside of the person, not like any deep knowledge of interior anatomy. I don't have any, and I don't want to have any. It's just what is seen, what's on the surface, and what generally I know from the inside, like how the bone structure is on someone, but not any deep anatomy knowledge. It's just the way they respond. And each day they change. Like if someone gets heavier, I add more. It's just the way it looks. When they get lighter, it comes off again. So it becomes sort of endless after a while, and at a certain point, it's just stopped.
You have to stop and go on to something else.
Yeah.
Almost. I mean, just.
But it very seldom. It takes a long time for it to get to these kind of stage where it's really recognizable. Most of the work is is in the part you don't see. It's
Building
all
the
in
form, building
yeah,
the form.
it's very interior.
You're talking about surfaces and appearances, and you know, someone would praise your eye, I guess. You know, you sound like Monet in search of the specific effects at a given moment, you know, as the pose may change a little bit, or as you say, as the model puts on weight. Do you think about the personality or the character of the model, or is it strictly a visual thing?
No, well,
Form
that is a visual thing. One's character comes out. I mean, you can't help it. That's what it comes out intensely. Like these pieces take a few years, and in a time of a few years, one's personality is really comes out. I mean,
from the continual contact?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So that is really a part of it, because that's what I see is that person, not just the, you know, not just a leg or a thigh. And their moods like change the way that looks to me. You know, maybe it's the way I feel about them at the time, but the tightening of their body is shown, or happiness, you know. All those different stages go into it.
I wonder if we could, I think we're prepared to go to the portrait head of Robert Scull, the well-known pop art collector. He's probably getting tired of being known as the pop art collector. He happens to be in the studio with us right at the moment. And he didn't shrink when we said pop art collector, but a well-known figure as a figure in the art world and as a collector. How did you come to do Mr. Scull's portrait, Bill?
Well, he's was buying a sculpture of mine. You know, these come in, the bronzes are in editions, like it's just don't do one.
Right.
And he owns a copy of each of these. And when I returned from Germany, we both were ready, I don't know, to get to work on a portrait. And I was really filled with energy at the time. I was
When did you do it, and how long were you at work on it?
It took 14 months was the span of time. And it was every Saturday and Sunday. But for actual work was 13 months. So we missed 4 weekends. So it was 13 real weekends of about 5 to 6 hours each weekend. And it was, you know, an intense modeling session for him, and well, for me too. But took 13 months or 13, yeah.
Can you give us sort of a typical day, the experience that would go on? I mean, how long would you work? Would you take a coffee break? Mr. Scull get upset and get mad at you and stalk out of the room? Or
No,
that wouldn't happen. Okay. So,
no,
but kind of
he
give us
had to sit in a, it was fairly difficult. You know, the position, his head is raised and turned to the side. That's fairly hard on your neck and everything. So the sessions would go about 20 minutes or 25 minutes, and then we'd have a little break, and then another 25 and a break. And then sometime we would stop and go to lunch. You know, so it'd be 3 hours maybe before, and then 2 hours after lunch, sort of like that. So it depended on the days, you know, because I only work with natural light. So if it got started a little early and it clouded in late afternoon, we'd have to stop maybe early. But no, it was amazingly. It was always on time and always there, and
patient
worked very hard.
And enduring and
yeah, it was the best model I've had as far as. Yeah.
What were you talking while you worked, or was it sort of just the silent concentration, each one in his own role, so to speak?
No, well, we listened to Mozart records, and
good
Wagner,
music to sculpt by, isn't it?
Sometimes I got him to listen to Wagner when the Ring Cycle was on the radio on Saturdays, but otherwise Mozart. You know.
Well, were you trying to express anything particular in the head, or again, is it this intense visual concentration that you've been mentioning with your other work?
Well, well, I hope that there was a personality or character seen, you know, in the portrait. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I think there is. I mean, as we see the profile
Can it be
now.
more, maybe more from the straight? Sorry.
Yeah, he has been from the.
Oh, from the side.
What you want it from? More from the side or from the front?
No, from the front a little bit more, if it's possible.
Yeah, well, I think he will. He's been from the front at a distance, but he'll come in a little closer and so forth on it.
Yeah, it shows like a little more
Of the expression and the
yeah.
character and the detail and so forth. Let me ask you a question applied in the practical sense. Has this helped your career as a sculptor, as an artist? I mean, Mr. Skull is an important figure in the art world, and that's well recognized. Will the fact that you have done his portrait raise your stature, in a sense, as an artist to be reckoned with? I mean, I hate to put it as baldly as that, but that's the way the art world often judges the quality of an artist, in a sense. Sometimes they can't see the quality of the work, but they may look at your work longer because it happens to be Mr. Skull. I mean, it's a well-done sculpture, I'm not saying that. But sometimes people don't see the quality in it. Do you think the fact that it is Mr. Skull, that will help your artistic career, in a sense? That they will look a little longer at it than they would otherwise?
I think almost the idea of portraiture in that way it's for, like, well, if you take it like from the 19th century, say Rodin did portraits of Rose, his wife or his mistress, but mostly he did portraits of men who were known in the time, you know, the politicians or the just important people.
Writers and so forth.
And yeah, and I think that's sort of generally the area that one should concentrate on in portraits almost. It's because a portrait is partly that person, and you want that kind of man of a lot of experience. You know, it was very helpful in this particular portrait. Someone who's done a lot, and you know, that really comes through. And
gives you a lot to work with.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly.
Yep.
I mean, of course, you know, everyone would also do the portraits of maybe their friends or something, and they can be good. But historically, portraits are often of important people, and they're kept. They're like saved, partly for that reason and partly for the quality. And then, as time goes on, if the person's important enough and the sculpture was good enough, well, then it really is saved. It's hardly a combination, I think, you know, historically. But for, like right now, I don't know what the
effect would be.
Yeah.
When you speak of Rodin, which sculptors have helped you the most, would you say, Bill, in terms of your own development? I mean, have there been some that helped you get off the ground, or in a sense, sculptural sense, or gave you some ideas that gave you impetus to go in your own direction? I mean, are there some figures that you...
Well, of older sculptors, it was Charles Despiau, the French sculptor, was very important. And then Rodin, finally. I always resisted him for some reason. It took me years and years to really understand Rodin. Because when I was in Germany, I happened to take a little trip. I was going to England, and by accident took the boat from Calais to England, and saw the burghers of Calais in their spot, in the site. And it was very impressive, you know, and I really finally got it through my thick head, you know, Rodin, and then stopped in Paris on the way back, and you know, finally really liked him, you know, a great deal.
So he's been, I don't know if inspirational figure, but he has been a helpful figure to you in your work.
Yeah, in like a more mature phase, I would say. You know, he really is right now is very important, yeah.
We're ready to look at your other figure here. Can you give us a little bit of its history and development, and is this Bella again, and did you have to chase her to Germany too?
No, this is Nancy. This was done from 1970 to 1974. This was also cast in Munich. When I had the other one cast, we found out it was such a good foundry. This was just shipped over in plaster and was cast there. No, it took 4 years, partly from the modeling and partly if the model leaves, like she would go on a vacation for 2 months to Colorado or somewhere. So it was stopped, you know, and it was done. It didn't hurt it. I felt it grew at the same sort of pace. You know, each time we came back to it, it developed and.
Sort of its own natural, organic sense of development.
Yeah, it worked out very well over that 4-year period.
When you came back to it, did you have a sense of refreshment, really? I mean, if in a sense of approaching it, almost seeing it new again and able to attack it with more vigor or insight? Did it work that way at all?
Yeah, it certainly did, because it's fairly calm, you know, lying on the stomach. It's, you know, it's a calm sort of thing, and it was harder to really find its energy. You know, you work on something for a long period of time that's calm, and, you know, it started to get, you lose it a little. But I'd come back and would be surprised by it and find, you know, it really had energy to it. You know, and it had a lot of movement and, to me, a lot of vitality, even though it was so, you know, lying on its stomach like that.
Reposeful,
yeah,
if we can say so.
So each time it really, you know, it was interesting to me.
To come down to a very mundane level for just a moment, how much does it cost to have an edition cast? I think you said you have 3 of these cast at the moment.
No, 3 of the Bella and 2 of the Nancy so far.
How much, that can run into a lot of money, can it?
Yeah, the casting's very expensive. It's around $1,000. That's what I say, around 1,000
per piece.
Yeah,
per piece.
That sometimes includes molds and patinas, and sometimes it gets to be more because the castings aren't always the same. Like there's sometimes a lot of repair that has to go on in a bronze, and the repair can go on for a couple of weeks. You know, welding and grinding and doing a lot to it, and each little square inch costs more. They figure it out to the square inch, not to the quality of the art or anything like that.
No, they wouldn't. I mean,
so it's sort of, the price really varies a great deal from piece to piece, but I generally say $1,000.
That really could hold back a sculptor who was in financial straits. It could hold back the development of their work, couldn't it really? I mean, they would have a number of plaster statues around, a number of wax sculptures around, and they couldn't afford to get them cast.
Yeah, exactly. But originally I worked at the Modern Art Foundry in Long Island City, where the portrait was cast. They've been very good to me over the years. So, so I've done a lot of the work there. Sometimes in casting, if you know a lot of the craft, you can do a lot of the stages yourself and cut down the price.
Cut it down, yeah.
You know, if that's all.
And also, do you like to do some of it yourself so you can keep sort of more or less a quality control over it at as much as possible, or?
Well, in bronze casting, you have to, because so much happens when they pour the metal in. It's a lot of things have to be done to it, you know, and you have to at least be there to make the decisions, like how it's, you know, a certain taste comes through by the craftsmen who are working on it, or if the artist is there present.
Is there any place now in New York or elsewhere that people can see your work? Are there any on exhibit, or will there be? Or?
Well, with Richard Bellamy, he's my dealer now, and I'll be having a show with him sometime in next year, 77.
77.
Yeah, it should be like 9 pieces.
Does he have a gallery now? I know he did, and then he didn't. Is he dealing on a private basis now?
Presently, yeah, he has a by appointment only gallery on Park Avenue, 333 Park Avenue South. Right.
So where do you have stated from the beginning of the program that you're sort of an individualist, and I really believe you are, and that you've sort of more or less gone your own way, and I'm sure you'll continue to do that. Do you see the art world maybe coming into step with you slowly in the future, becoming more interested in realism?
Yeah, I think so. There seems to be an interest. I definitely find people interested, and a lot of the artists are interested, even who do other things. They're not, I've gotten a fairly good response from people.
Their minds aren't totally closed, and they're open to what you're doing and sensing that. Really, it's obvious realism is coming back, I think, as a force in the art world, and I'm glad to see it. And your work is certainly adding something to the positive direction of that, because it really, I think the art world has been lost in artifice and superficiality for a number of years now, and I think yours work is really a positive sign. I'm glad you were with us, Bill. Glad you could come along, and glad we could see your work. The program is Artist and Critic. We've been speaking with sculptor Bill Crozier. I'm Don Gray, and have a great day. Bye-bye now.